The pilot ejected from the aircraft before the crash and is reportedly safe. The aircraft took off from IAF's Baikonur Air Force Station on a routine mission in afternoon when its engine developed technical issues, according to sources. Initial input suggests that the aircraft malfunctioned due to a bird hit, NDTV reported, citing a defense spokesperson. A court of inquiry has been ordered to investigate the cause of accident. India's MiG-21 fleet recently hit headlines when one of the jets was shot down by the Pakistan Air Force, PAF, during an aerial combat, and the pilot was taken in custody by the Pakistan Armed Forces. The pilot was eventually released. This series of events unfurled following an attack on an Indian paramilitary convoy by Pakistan-based militant group, Jaish-e-Mohammed, JEM, which led to the death of 40 soldiers and the Indian retaliatory strike on alleged terrorist camp in Pakistan. Mikoyan Gurevich MiG-21, NATO reporting name, Fishbed, is a supersonic jet fighter and interceptor aircraft, designed by the Mikoyan Gurevich Design Bureau in the Soviet Union. It made aviation records, became the most produced supersonic jet aircraft in aviation history, the most produced combat aircraft since the Korean War, and previously the longest production run of a combat aircraft, now exceeded by both the McDonnell Douglas F-15 Eagle and General Dynamics F-16 Fighting Falcon. Approximately 60 countries over 4 continents have flown the MiG-21, and it still serves many nations 6 decades after its maiden flight. The Indian Air Force currently operates MiG-21 Bison, MiG-21-92, upgraded MiG-21 bis Fishbed N. The MiG-21 bis is one of the oldest variants of the fighter in IAF service. The IAF has been the world's largest operator of the jet, the first variants of which entered service with the Air Force in the 60s. An Indian Air Force, IAF, MiG-21 Type 69, MiG-21 trainer aircraft crashed near Gwalior in the state of Madhya Pradesh on September 25. The aircraft was on a routine mission and was airborne from Gwalior's Air Force Station Maharajar. Aircraft crashed at around 10 a.m. while on approach for landing when it was around 11 kilometers from the air base. Both the pilots, a group captain and a squadron leader, ejected safely and were picked up by rescue helicopter. A court of inquiry has been ordered to investigate the cause of accident. India's MiG-21 fleet hit headlines earlier this year when one of the jets was shot down by the Pakistan Air Force, PAF, during an aerial combat, and the pilot was taken in custody by the Pakistan Armed Forces, who was eventually released. Before she climbed into the world's most advanced stealth fighter jet to become the Air Force Reserve's first female F-35 fighter pilot, Colonel Gina Torch Sabrik had already flown 10 airframes and racked up 22 years of flying experience. "My family can tell you I've wanted to be a fighter pilot forever," said Sabrik, the first female commander of the 419th Fighter Wing at Hill Air Force Base, Utah. "I've always been fascinated with air and space." Service is in her DNA. Growing up in Tobyhanna, Pennsylvania, her mother was a nurse and her father a police officer, and she had several uncles who served in the Air Force. But it was a trip to a local air show that turned her aviation dream into a tangible goal. "My dad was a private pilot, so he took me to an air show when I was a little girl, and I remember looking up at those airplanes and being amazed," Sabrik said. "Ever since then, I knew I was going to be a pilot." Twice in her teens she went to U.S. Space Camp in Huntsville, Alabama. A few years later, she had followed in her dad's footsteps, earning a private pilot's license while studying aerospace engineering at Penn State. By 1995, Sabrik was ready to join the Air Force and had no doubts she'd be wearing a flight suit. "If you really want something, you work your hardest to get it." Sabrik proved herself as the top graduate from Navigator training, launching her career first as an F-15E Strike Eagle weapons system officer and later as a distinguished graduate from pilot training into the F-16 Fighting Falcon. Add to that the MQ-9 Reaper, a remotely piloted aircraft, and the T-38 Talon, which she flew as Red Air, or simulated enemy against F-22 Raptors. Most recently, she flew special operations missions in the C-146A Wolfhound out of Duke Field, Florida. "I don't have the typical flying career," Sabrik said of the multiple airframes she's flown. I've had the opportunity to bounce around with different aircraft and mission sets. I think it's made me a better pilot because I've had the opportunity to experience so much outside the fighter world. Her career is different in other ways too. Sabrick said she's grown accustomed to answering questions about being a woman in the fighter world, one that, until 1993 when Jeannie Leavitt became the Air Force's first female fighter pilot, was dominated by men. In the 90s, women were just getting into fighters, Sabrick said. Back then, you were either the only girl in pilot training, or just one of two. But once you prove yourself in the cockpit, gender doesn't matter anymore. A fighter pilot is a fighter pilot and everyone has to do the same job. Sabrick said a lot has changed in the past 20 years. She doesn't feel like the token girl in the squadron. She has more than 2,500 flying hours, including time in combat, and has deployed numerous times in support of operations Allied Force, Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, and Noble Eagle. It's great to know that today there are little girls, like me, who look up and see fighter jets and say, I can do that. Sabrick said she loves talking to school groups and touting some of the ways both men and women can serve in the Air Force Reserve. When you take off the helmet and the long hair comes out, that's a good thing for girls to see, Sabrick said. I remember when I was a lieutenant, we brought a group of Girl Scouts to the F-15E simulator. That was really eye-opening to me because it was a moment when I realized how far we've come. We were able to show these girls what a port. Still, there's only a small number of women fighter pilots in the Air Force, and only 3 others, all active duty, in the F-35 community. Sabrick said the birth of her son, Tyler, in 2011 was the deciding factor in leaving active duty for the Air Force Reserve, as it offered more flexibility in how and where she served. The Reserve provides an opportunity to serve either part-time or full-time when it works for you and your family, she said. It's unique because everyone is here by choice. About 2/3 of our airmen serve part-time, and they do a phenomenal job of balancing work, both military and civilian, and family, because they want to serve in some capacity. Earlier this year, the Reserve brought Sabrick, a single mom, to Hill AFB in northern Utah, where less than 3 years earlier the 419th FW and its active duty counterpart, the 388th FW, received the Air Force's first operational F-35A Light. When I was told I got this job, a huge smile came across my face and I thought, wow, I just got the golden ticket, Sabrick said. It's an amazing opportunity to be a fighter pilot and fly the latest 5th-generation aircraft at an operational wing. It doesn't get any better. Sabrick became fully qualified in the F-35 in August, having finished 2 months of training at Eglin AFB, Florida, and additional flying hours at Hill. I'm still new in the airplane, Sabrick said. Every sortie you learn something new, so as I continue to fly I'll continue to learn. What the F-35 brings to the fight now, it's light years beyond 4th-gen aircraft. Aside from the stealth technology that keeps the F-35 virtually invisible to radar, Sabrick said the most impressive aspect of the jet is its sensor fusion, the vast wealth of information it collects and sends that can be shared with other aircraft, giving pilots a bigger picture of the battle space. Learning the F-35 is a challenge, and it's a lot of new information to process and interpret, Sabrick said. But her diverse flying experience prepared her to make yet another switch. Luckily, it's still stick and rudder, and flying is flying. Sabrick looks forward to helping the F-35 reach full operational capability at Hill. By 2019, the base will be home to 78 jets and 4 fighter squadrons capable of worldwide deployment. It's a responsibility and privilege she couldn't have imagined as a girl growing up in Tobyhanna. Sitting in this seat for the 419th, surrounded by these beautiful mountains, flying the premier fighter of the Air Force, I could not be happier to be where I am right now. Over the last 4 years, SATS 29 has completed aviation pre-flight indoctrination in Pensacola, Florida, primary flight training in Corpus Christi, Texas, where she learned to fly the T-6 Texan II, then to Meridian, Mississippi, where she flew the T-45C.